So I'm kind of surprised I haven't done this video lately because this is a topic that's more or less a popular one, ranking the female characters or the Kunoichi if you prefer in Naruto. Now, despite the way I wrote the title, I'm not going to be ranking every female character in Naruto. Honestly, if I did that, we'd be here all day. But similar to my ranking of the geniuses in Naruto, I'm going to be choosing the top 5 in my opinion with some honorable mentions. For context, this is not going to be a ninja waifu type video. Like, I'm not going to be basing my entries off of looks or anything of that nature. This is solely going to be basing them off of personality and how they're written into the story, into the narrative. That said, remember this is just my own opinion and placements of these characters, so if you don't feel like one is placed high enough, or them giving someone else too much credit, by all means let me know in the comments, but keep in mind this is just my own designated list. I say that mainly because the 5th entry on this list is really going to be the only exception when it comes to the criteria for this ranking, due to the fact that she doesn't get much screen time. So with all that said, let's just get right into the video with number 5, Anko. But first, before we get started, if you haven't yet, please make sure you smash the like button and smash that subscribe button so you can get more content like this in the future. If you haven't yet, please click the bell to get more notifications about videos in the future. And with all out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. To be frank, Anko is here at number 5 solely because of her personality. Like, for real, Anko is one of the most chill characters in Naruto, not just among the female cast, but the entire cast in general. As a kid watching / reading Naruto as it was airing, I noticed that most of the adults in the show, namely the Jonin, were all more or less the same, with the exception of those like Kakashi, Guy, and to some extent Asuma and Shikaku. All the other Jonin had a similar, calm, almost stoic personality. Not Anko though. Anko was such a stark contrast to the other Jonin in the series, especially during the early parts of Naruto. Like, take the first Chunin exams for example. As we just got done with the watching our main and supporting cast rack their brains over a test that wasn't actually about the test itself, but on how to gather information on the test by means of cheating, I guess, or gathering intel for the answers and not getting caught doing so. All the while, they have an exam proctor who stands on business, Ibiki. Now, despite the fact that being the head of the interrogation unit for the Leaf Village, Ibiki actually turned out to be a chill dude. However, during the exams, he was literally driving the cast and probably even us among the fandom crazy. And then, once the exams wrap up and the cast can get a sigh of relief, in comes Anko like a cannonball and surprises everyone with screaming about the next exam, and even tries to get everyone hyped up for it, despite it being pretty much the most dangerous part of the exam by far. Even Sakura had her own humorous opinion of Anko in that she's a screaming nutcase who reminded her of Naruto. During the rest of the tuning exams arc, she did have a slight change in attitude for obvious, understandable reasons, but even after the arc, she did still have a pretty chill demeanor about her, even still had it in one of the filler episodes in part 1. Granted, as I mentioned earlier, she gets little to no screen time following the rest of the tuning exams arc. In fact, I go so far as to say that even Tenten got more than Anko did in the rest of the series. That said, I think that she would have been a very good inclusion in the Tenchi Bridge arc in the beginning of Shippuden. Not necessarily excluding Yamato, but I feel like Anko tagging along would have made a perfect sense, being that she is a former student of Orochimaru and also she bore a curse mark. But, I mean, I digress. Point is, I think Anko was one of my favorite female characters solely for her chill personality, as I said, and her demeanor is a nice takeaway from the other, otherwise stoic Jonin that we see outside of the main ones. Anko just seems to be that tomboyish kind of woman that you'd want to just hang out with, and who would even want to go mudding with you or on something on a 4-wheeler. So for all that, I think it's okay for her to be on this list. At number 4, we have Temari. Now, to be honest with you, Temari is on this list for almost the same reasons as Anko, but just more and kind of better. Like Anko, Temari was a pretty chill person, had a pretty chill personality about her. Even though we're introduced to her as someone we're not particularly supposed to like because she's obviously a part of the plot to destroy Konoha, it's hard to deny the impression she made, even when you think about how she was in the shadow of Gar, who got pretty much the most development in that arc. Like, Temari stood on business in part 1. She completely wiped the floor with Tenten during the preliminaries, and even made Hiruzen acknowledge the Saiyan trio was one not to be taken lightly. And to think that she was even worse, like she did even worse to Yuya during the Sasuke retrieval mission, after we saw how much of a hassle Shikamaru was having against her. To be fair, she didn't have to deal with the summons, but I'm not so sure if they would have made much difference anyway. And even in part 1 during the tuning exams, it is shown in a scene with the Saiyan trio and Baki that Temari is a bit conflicted about having to betray the leaf in the first place. So even early on, she's shown to have a bit of a moral compass. And again, though, like with Anko, sadly, Temari doesn't get too much to do for the rest of the series. But to be honest with you, that's not really a bad thing. She gets reasonable roles and screen time during the Five Kage Summit arc and the War arc. Like, she doesn't overstay her importance either. She's there as a support for Gar in the Summit arc and does what she can reasonably against Sasuke alongside everyone else there. And she is a pretty good confidant for Gaara as well as, during certain situations. And in the War arc, she's actually entertaining to have on screen, whether it's the kind of banter she has with Shikamaru or when she's actually fighting. She gives a good amount of support to the 4th Division, and speaking of Shikamaru, Temari is partly on this list due to her relationship with Shikamaru. I don't know if that's fair or not, but I don't feel like I'm alone on this. Their relationship throughout the series is actually built upon. And even though there's not a ton of screen time throughout the whole series that's involving those two, it's enough to make their marriage in Boruto make the most sense. Not saying all the others don't, but again, I think their relationship is probably the most believable. I mean, in the Sasuke retrieval arc, her giving Shikamaru a pep talk, but at the same time telling him to man up is so real, and it paints her as someone who won't sugarcoat stuff and will just tell you how it is. So even though Temari doesn't get much screen time and doesn't really push the plot, outside of Shikamaru's story, further outside the tuning exams arc, she does provide good help and advice to both Gar and Shikamaru when it's needed. She's headstrong and always stands on business. I think she's definitely one of the best written characters in the series outside of just even the female cast. Again, just not amongst them anyway. Also, she was the first one to actually hit Madara after he was brought back with Edo Tensei, so I think she deserves a spot on this list on that alone. Number 3, we have Sakura Haruno. Now, I know this one is going to be one that gets me in the most trouble. I know there are people out there who hate Sakura to no end, and those who actually love her character, and those who are, in between. It may or may not surprise you that I'm the third option. I'm more or less indifferent towards Sakura. And now you might be thinking, well, if that's the case, why is she at number 3, or even on this list to begin with? Well, that's because despite my indifference towards her, her character is actually written pretty good, at least in my objective opinion. Recently, my opinions of Sakura have changed a bit. I'm still indifferent, but I've come to realize why her character is not a bad character, and not as bad as I myself have made her out to be. A lot of fans' criticism of Sakura, mine included, comes from the notion that she is more or less useless in the show. And I'm not really denying it per se, but I feel like she didn't get as much to do as I would have liked. I get that when compared to Naruto, Sasuke, and Kakashi, she isn't able to do as much, especially in part 1 where even with their respective power-ups, Naruto and Sasuke still struggle to fight opponents such as Orochimaru. Instead, aside from her, attempt to protect Naruto and Sasuke against the Sound Ninja during the Forest of Death, arc, which I've always respected Sakura for. Sakura's role in part 1, and maybe for the most of the series, is to be a moral compass more so than anything. More for Sasuke than Naruto or Kakashi. Even Kishimoto said in an interview that before the Five Kage Summit arc, before Sasuke went too far gone, that Sakura was the one person Sasuke was unable to harm or do any evil towards, because she's the only one who gives him enough love to survive, and she believes in him, and Sasuke knows it. Sakura does provide substantial help in the series, even if it's not the kind of help we would all necessarily expect or would want from Sakura. Something else that a lot of people have hated Sakura for, and I myself have as well, is her treatment of Naruto. Now, I'm right there with y'all, but something we all have to remember is that the main cast in part 1 is composed mostly of children. Sakura is a 12 to 13-year-old kid, and when part 1 begins. So yes, she's a ninja, but she's still a child. How many of y'all, when you were 13 or in middle school, had a girl or a boy, vice versa, that would act similar to how Sakura would? Now, fast forward to about 19 or 20 years old, do those people still act the same? And now I'm sure that, in some situations they still do, but I think it's safe to say that for the most part, most people grow up and act more mature the older they get. The same can be said for Sakura, with the exceptional wacky punches that she gives Naruto that, granted, aren't necessary. She's mainly there for support for Naruto whenever he needs help, whether it's to be physically healed or for moral support like what she was giving Sai the business when he was talking down to Naruto, albeit he was trying to do that on purpose anyway. I think she does get a bad rap. Sometimes it's deserved, sometimes it's not. I think the biggest complaint in terms of power scaling, it's just she doesn't feel like she's the main heroine of the story, and we're supposed to get that impression. Even more so during the war arc when she says she's caught up to Naruto and Sasuke, even though again, it doesn't seem like it, she's definitely gotten a lot stronger, but compared to how strong Naruto and Sasuke are at that particular moment, she doesn't really feel like they're equal. So maybe it's more of a bumble on Kishibota's part rather than Sakura. It's made even weirder when you take into account that with the exception of Lee and Tenten, she doesn't really belong to a clan with a special jutsu. Like all the other Konoha 12 belong to a specific clan that have a specific kind of trope to them, which I feel like could have benefited Sakura more, either that or have her learn some top-notch genjutsu like she did, like she was hyped up to do. That would have been a huge help with her strength and medical ninjutsu, but again, I digress. Maybe when it comes to Sakura, she's not meant to fill the same type of role that Naruto and Sasuke do. Again, I think she's written to be more of a moral compass for both of them. And the times where she does make some questionable or, stupid decisions could be explained in certain ways. Like when she couldn't bring herself to kill Sasuke during the summon arc. Like, I get it. Sasuke's already tried to kill her and Kakashi both. At that point, she must have realized Sasuke's too far gone. And yeah, she's also a ninja. She's supposed to set those feelings aside to do her duty.
Duty. Diarrhea.
But she's also in love. That's a real human thing. And I will say that their relationship is questionably built, but it's not as believable as Shikamaru and Temari's, but it is there. I believe if we had gotten a little more screen time with Sasuke and Sakura in like extreme situations before he left the village, it might have been easier to sell them as a thing, as a unit, as what we already got. Because the way it makes it seem, at least to a lot of fans, is that she's only interested in him for his looks, which again, a lot of fans tend to have a problem with, that she's only interested in Sasuke for a superficial reason, and that's it. And that she lets that issue sit at the forefront of her mind where it has no place there. And again, I myself have, found myself thinking the same thing about her. But still, when looking back and taking another approach to it and looking at it more objectively, it is clear that they do have a bond. Sasuke doesn't say thank you or sorry very much to anyone, and as far as I'm aware, he only says those kind of words to the members of Team 7, like specifically, only, but mainly to Sakura. And it's because of all that she does for him. Sakura does provide the motherly type of role in Team 7 family. Like, she's consistently looking out for their well-being of her teammates and will go above and beyond for them. Without going on to too much why I feel like she annoys me sometimes, the only other reasons that the fandom seems to really harp on her is her confession to Naruto, when she couldn't stab Obito, and her trying to take on Tandale's Madara. For the first one, I used to hate the fake confession, but I've kind of gotten used to it now. It's somewhat understandable because Sakura knows she can't physically stop Naruto from trying to bring Sasuke back, and she doesn't want Naruto to suffer anymore, so in her mind, what else could she do? Granted, who knows, there could have been a better way, but there was a lot going on, like a lot of chaos going on at that time, so she just did what she felt was right, which, is a very human thing to do. Her inability to stab Obito's Rinnegan is up for debate. It's one of those things where you could say, well, what would you do in that situation? But Obito said that it was okay, and that if Madara gets the other Rinnegan, everyone is screwed with the capital S. So there's not much excuse you could give for that. Plus, she is a ninja, so realistically, it shouldn't bother her. But in her defense, the plot demanded that Madara get the Rinnegan anyway, so it might have been one of those things where she just happened to be the one to be tasked with, quote, stabbing the Rinnegan. Speaking of Madara, that is the only thing I can't say in her defense. Like, I don't know why she thought going headfirst towards someone who was way stronger than the guy that it took both Naruto and Sasuke and the rest of the alliance to beat was a good idea. I get she wanted to be a diversion, and that's fine, but there's probably a better way to do that. Anyway, all that is to say, I really do think Sakura is pretty well written, for what she is, despite all the flaws in her character. No character in this series is perfect. Not even my all-time favorite character, Kakashi. I know I may have went on an unorganized rant on how I feel about Sakura, but I just have never put my own thoughts on her out in the open, so here it is. And again, I know I'm going to get flack on both sides for it, whether it's how I shouldn't have put her on the list in the first place, or that I don't have her high enough. But in any case, that's where I'm putting Sakura. That's where she's staying. Feel free to harp on me if you want, either way. But I think she's pretty well written for what she can be. Yes, she doesn't feel like the main heroine at times, but one way or the other, she is. And I think if you were to look at her objectively throughout the series, that she does provide more to the plot, specifically for Naruto and Sasuke, than you might realize. Moving on to number 2, we have Hinata Hyuga. I'm not so sure if people are going to get on to me too much about this one or not, but that said, I don't really have too much to say about Hinata as I do about Sakura, despite the fact I think she's better written. I know that Hinata usually gets, less to do in the plot than Sakura, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Hinata exists to be the moral compass for Naruto just as much as Sakura is to Sasuke. Now, obviously, she doesn't get many opportunities to do so, but when she does, she shines. I feel like Hinata, more so than most of the cast, is one of the more meaningful souls in the series. She's practically prone to just help people in any situation. Hinata also has the disposition of someone who would be nice to even the loser of the class, which is exactly how she is in her own respective universe anyway. She befriends Naruto pretty much right from the jump and has always had her support. Hinata is someone who will always have your back, and that's something that's always resonated with me. Especially when you consider the nature of the world of Naruto, where ninjas can portray other ninjas, and even when it comes down to the more petty stuff, like how she's arguably the most mature one out of the Konoha 12 in part 1, whereas the other ones, for the most part, are kind of like loudmouths and pretty much think, irrationally in most decisions, such as Kiba, Ino, and even Naruto. Hinata is one of the more calm and rational characters. And yeah, that's, partially due to her timid nature, but as the series goes on, she becomes just as lethal as any of the Konoha 12, if not more. Again, Hinata may not get much development in terms of pushing the main plot forward, but she is there to really show us the impact Naruto has on people. Hinata has known Naruto's words since day one and knew the kind of strength he had in him, to which she even tried to incorporate herself. And yes, her only real meaningful moments in Shippuden were her sacrifice against Pain and her moment with Naruto in the war. The Pain part is pretty self-explanatory. I'm pretty sure all of us were cheering her on, as she knew she would die if she took Pain on, but she didn't care as long as it kept Naruto safe. Speaking of her initial objective, in that fight, it was pretty clever. Like, she had Pain thinking she was going to try to take him on from the jump, but then Hinata instead turned around and tried to take the rods that were impaling Naruto out. I just thought that was really clever, like a really clever tactic, as she knew the best chance to win was to free Naruto rather than take Pain on herself. But I feel like her moment in the war arc is just as important, if not more so. I know people's rage that the reason for this moment, which included Neji's death, was to get, Hinata and Naruto together, but I also feel it's a very strong realization for Naruto. Nagato in the Pain arc warned Naruto that there would be a lot more suffering that awaited him, especially if it came to war. But Naruto didn't see the truth of it until he started realizing the amount of casualties that there were resulting because of it. In that moment, Obito was almost on the verge of convincing Naruto to give up, that all of his efforts were amounting to nothing, and from what it looked like, he almost gave in. And it was only until Hinata slapped him on the face and told him the real truth, that if you give up, your comrade's sacrifice will have been meaningless, and that's when they truly die, for you're no longer comrades then. So again, she may not be written into the story as much as Sakura is, but in my opinion, I think she's a better character, has a better character about her, and has a better personality. In short, Hinata is just a true friend through and through. Okay, so before I get to my number 1 pick, I'll list some honorable mentions. First honorable mention is Granny Chiyo, mainly because she was hilarious as a character, but also she got things done. Like Temari, when she was on the battlefield, she did not mess around, she stood on business. Next honorable mention is Kushina. I mean, come on, it's Naruto's mom. It'd be a crime if I didn't have her on here, at least as a mention. In all seriousness, she's awesome. Very loving, but lethal at the same time. Barely in the series, but she leaves a lasting impression on how dedicated she was to both Minato and Naruto. And last honorable mention is Konan. I feel like Konan got so underused, which sucks when you think about how she's technically one of the heads of the Akatsuki, but at the same time, she kind of doesn't feel like it. In her defense, she is in the shadow of Pain, so it's not really her fault. But at least she had one really good fight before she went out, and she went out like a boss. And when you think about it, you know, if she had killed Obito, she would have saved the world. So there's that. Okay, so now it's time for the number one, what should be obvious number one female character in Naruto, Tenten. Like, for real, y'all need to stop sleeping on Tenten. She actually does way more for the series than y'all realize. I mean, like, for starters, okay, yeah, I need to stop plowing ahead. No, for real, the number one spot definitely goes to Tsunade. Not only is she the best written, but arguably one of the best written arcs in the series in terms of storytelling is centered around her. Her backstory is probably one of the most relatable in the manga as well. Her losing her loved ones to war is something that can totally be attributed to the real world. And her becoming a cynic as a result of that is like a totally real aspect. And we get that impression right from the jump, where we're given bits and pieces from her interactions with Orochimaru and later on Naruto and Jiraiya. But then we get the full backstory from Shizune, and we completely see how she became so jaded and cynical. And her wrestling with the decision to betray the village, her home, for the chance of being able to be with her loved ones again is something that we would all put ourselves in the situation and be like, what would I do if that was me? You know, it's one of those moments where you initially think you wouldn't ever do such a thing, but it's also a case where you don't know what you do until you're actually in that position. And it's totally human, which is something I really appreciate about her character arc. But her ultimate decision to do the right thing, to take Orochimaru down, and at the same time accepting her role to be the 5th Hokage was an awesome moment for me. And even though she doesn't get too much to do until the war arc, she does still have pretty awesome moments. Namely, her last conversation with Jiraiya about Naruto and his parents. And, you know, it's a really cathartic moment. And again, one that we don't get, you know, enough of from both Jiraiya and Tsunade. You know, her pretty much accepting that, you know, Jiraiya was probably the best thing for her all along, you know, aside from Dawn. But yeah, and her, you know, realizing and her coming to grips with Jiraiya's death was a emotionally gut-punching scene. I think her crying scene over Jiraiya like hit just as hard as Naruto's did, if I'm gonna be honest, if not worse. I know that might be, you know, towing the line a bit, but it's Tsunade, y'all, like, for real. But her also talking down the elders when they were pretty much underestimating Naruto's skill as a ninja. Like, I've said this before multiple times, but Tsunade's faith in Naruto was book worthy. Always has been, dude, from day one. And that's something I've always loved about her character. Like, she personifies a lot more of the kind of faith that Hinata has in Naruto, but like, and then some. Like, she multiplies that by 100 just from that scene with the elders alone. Like, so yeah. And of course, when she gets to the war arc, she does not mess around. Her fight against Madara was all kinds of crazy. And even though Madara wasn't really going all out, she did put in work and even made Madara retract a statement about calling Tsunade a weak woman. All in all, Tsunade is without a doubt the best Kunoichi in Naruto, hands down. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Please be sure to let me know in the comments what you guys think, who you think the best written female character in Naruto is. If there's anyone you think that should have been on this list, please be sure to let me know in the comments. Again, though, keep in mind this is just my own personal list, so if you don't agree with it, that's okay. We all have our favorites. In any case, though, thank you all for watching all the way to the end. If you have, be sure to like and subscribe. And until my next one, LightningSnow, out.